She was never really part of this family. My husband said those words out loud, in front of everyone, at his brother's wedding reception. I was standing 6 feet away. I heard every syllable. My name is Claire Hensley. I'm 31 years old. I teach third grade at an elementary school in Asheville, North Carolina. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. I make my own birthday cards because I think store-bought ones feel hollow. I am not dramatic. I am not the kind of woman who makes scenes. I have spent the better part of 7 years being the quietest person in any room my husband's family occupied. And still, it wasn't enough. Let me back up. I met my husband, Daniel, when I was 24. He was kind in the way that some men are kind only in the beginning. Opened doors, remembered orders, texted back within minutes. His mother, Margaret, welcomed me warmly the first Thanksgiving I attended. She held both my hands when she met me and said, "You have honest eyes. I like that." I almost cried on the drive home. No one in his family had ever said anything like that to me before. Daniel's sister-in-law, Renee, was already married to his brother, Patrick. She had been part of the family for 4 years by the time I arrived. She was the kind of woman who organized everything: the holiday schedules, the seating arrangements, the gift pools, and made sure everyone understood, quietly and without saying it directly, that she was the one holding things together. She never said anything cruel to me outright. She was too smart for that. What she said instead were things like, "Claire, you're so sweet to try," when I brought a dish to Christmas dinner that didn't match her aesthetic. Or, "It must be nice to have such a relaxed personality," when I missed a family group chat message about rescheduling Easter. Small things. Consistent things. The kind of things that, if you repeated them to someone else, would sound like nothing. But that landed every single time. Margaret saw it. She never said so directly, but I caught her watching Renee sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not anger. Something older and more tired than anger. Daniel and I got married in the fall of the year I turned 27. Margaret gave me a necklace at our rehearsal dinner, a simple gold chain with a small oval locket. She pressed it into my palm with both hands, the same way she had held my hands when we first met. She said, "This was your mother-in-law's before she was anyone's mother-in-law. Now it's yours." I wore it the next day at the wedding. I have worn it on every important occasion since. 2 years into our marriage, Margaret was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. The decline was slow at first, then suddenly fast, the way those things sometimes go. By our 4th anniversary, she no longer remembered my name with consistency. By our 5th, she was in a memory care facility, 40 minutes outside the city. We visited every Sunday. Daniel and I went together, until we didn't. It was around year 5 that things between Daniel and me started to shift, not dramatically, not with a fight or a revelation, just a slow cooling, the kind you almost don't notice until one morning you realize you have not had a real conversation in 3 weeks. I told myself it was the stress of Margaret's illness. I told myself all couples go through seasons. I told myself things I needed to believe. Renee had always been close with Daniel. They texted often, which I told myself was normal. Siblings-in-law can be close. She called him sometimes in the evenings when I was in the next room grading papers. He would take the call in the kitchen and speak quietly, and when I asked who it was, he said, "Just Renee, Patrick drama," and I would nod and go back to my papers. It was a Sunday visit to Margaret about 8 months before Patrick and Renee's vow renewal, which is where this story ends up, that something shifted in me. Margaret was having a clear day. They happen sometimes, unpredictably, like windows opening in the middle of a long winter. She looked at me from across the table in the visiting room and said my name correctly, clearly, without prompting. "Claire," she said. "You look tired." I laughed a little. "I'm okay." She reached across the table and touched my wrist. Her hands were smaller than I remembered. "Is Daniel taking care of you?" I said yes, because what else do you say? She held my wrist a moment longer. Then she said something I have turned over in my mind every day since. "There is something I should have given you sooner. I kept meaning to. Don't let them take what belongs to you." I asked her what she meant, but the window had already started to close. She looked past me at something on the wall and started talking about a beach trip from 1987 and didn't come back to it. I told Daniel about it on the drive home, he said. She probably meant some piece of jewelry. She's been confused about her things. He was looking at the road. He did not ask which words she had used. He did not ask if I was okay. I kept thinking about it anyway. Patrick and Renee's vow renewal was planned for early June. 5 years of marriage, Renee had decided, deserved a celebration. She chose a venue outside the city, a restored farmhouse with string lights and a catering team, and a florist who specialized in dried arrangements. She sent a color-coordinated invitation suite with a wax seal. She had been planning it for 8 months. I know because she brought it up at every family gathering, every Sunday dinner, every group text. She was the kind of woman who needed you to know the scale of what she was doing. She also, I found out 6 weeks before the event, had been having long private conversations with my husband about whether I truly fit into the family long term. I found out the way you find out things you were never supposed to know. I picked up Daniel's phone to check the time because my own was charging in the bedroom. A message was visible on the screen, already open. It was from Renee. The sentence I saw was, "I just think Daniel deserves someone who actually belongs here. Claire has always been on the outside, and I think deep down he knows that." I put the phone down. I did not say anything that night. I went to the vow renewal. I wore a cornflower blue dress and the locket Margaret had given me, and I sat at a table near the back with some of Daniel's cousins, and I ate the salmon, and I smiled at the right moments, and I watched Renee stand next to Patrick and cry beautiful, deliberate tears. And I felt like I was watching a performance from a very long distance. The speeches came after dinner. Patrick spoke first, about Renee, about how she had made their family whole. Daniel was asked to say a few words as best man. He talked about brotherhood and commitment and choosing your person every day. Then Renee's mother spoke. Then one of Renee's sorority friends. Then there was a pause, and Renee took the microphone. And she talked about the family she had built, the family that was hers, the family she intended to protect. She looked at Daniel when she said it, not at me. She didn't need to look at me. But then Daniel spoke again, not into the microphone, just to the table nearest him, which happened to include 3 of his aunts and 2 cousins and my own mother, who had driven 4 hours to attend. He was relaxed. He had had 2 glasses of wine. He was not being careful. He said, "Honestly, some people just never really become part of the family. It happens." Renee's always understood that. One of his aunts asked, "Who are you talking about?" He didn't answer directly. He looked down at his glass. He smiled a little. But everyone at that table had turned to look at me. My mother was sitting 3 seats away. She was 62 years old, and she had driven 4 hours, and she did not say a word, but her face went very still in the way that her face goes still when she is deciding whether to cry or to stand up. I felt something go quiet inside me. Not the quiet of defeat. Something else. Something that had been building for a long time, and had just decided it was finished waiting. I did not make a scene. I excused myself from the table. I went to the restroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment, the blue dress, the locket, the tired eyes that Margaret had noticed 8 months earlier on a clear day in a memory care facility. Then I took out my phone and I called Margaret's care coordinator. I had called her before, about logistics, about visit schedules. But there was something else I had been meaning to ask about. Something I had put off because it felt too large to look at directly. 3 weeks before the vow renewal, I had been clearing out the spare bedroom at our house, and I had found, in a box of Daniel's things from his childhood home, a letter. It was in Margaret's handwriting, addressed to Daniel, unsealed. I don't know if he had ever read it. It was dated about a year before her diagnosis. In it, she talked about her estate. She talked about the house. She said clearly, and in her own words, that the house on Sycamore Drive had been purchased with money from her mother's inheritance, and had always been intended to remain with the women of her family. She said she had updated her will to reflect this. She said she had put the relevant documents and a letter of instruction inside the wooden box in her closet at the house, the one with the brass clasp, the one that had been her mother's. She wrote, "I trust you to make sure the right person receives this. If you forget or if something happens to me, Claire will know what to do. She has honest eyes. I don't know if Daniel had ever read it. The envelope looked untouched. I had photographed every page on my phone and put it back exactly where I found it. The care coordinator told me the house had not been sold. She confirmed that Margaret's belongings, the items that had not been moved to the facility, were still in the care of the estate. She confirmed that she could arrange a supervised visit to the property for immediate family and legal next of kin. I was listed as a family contact. I had been from the beginning. Renee was not. I went back to the reception. I sat down next to my mother. She looked at me. I looked at her. I said, "I'm okay. I know what I'm doing." She said, "Do you need me to stay?" I said, "Yes." The next morning, I called a family attorney, someone I found independently, not through anyone Daniel knew. I explained the situation. I described the letter. I described the wooden box. The attorney said that if Margaret had executed a valid will with the provisions I described, and if the documentation was in order, the contents of that box would be significant. 3 days later, the attorney and I and my mother drove to the house on Sycamore Drive. The house was a small craftsman bungalow with a porch that wrapped around the left side and a garden that had gone wild without Margaret's attention. The care coordinator let us in with a key she held on behalf of the estate. The house smelled like cedar, and old paper, and something floral I couldn't identify. I found the wooden box exactly where Margaret had described it in the letter. Closet, top shelf, behind a row of folded sweaters. It had a brass clasp. It was smaller than I expected, about the size of a shoebox, and heavier. I set it on the bed and opened it. Inside was a handwritten will, properly signed and dated, with a notary seal. There was a letter addressed to whoever needs to read this, written in Margaret's precise, even handwriting, dated the same week as the letter I had found in Daniel's box. There was a photograph of Margaret's mother standing in front of the house on Sycamore Drive, dated 1961. There was a copy of the original deed, and there was a small key, labeled in Margaret's writing, "Safe Deposit Box, First National. Account in Claire's name opened 2021. I had not known about the safe deposit box. I had not known she had opened one in my name. I could not have known, because she had done it quietly and privately, and she had put the key in the box, and she had trusted that I would find it. I sat on the edge of Margaret's bed in that quiet house, holding a key with my name on the label, and I let myself cry for the first time in a very long time. Not because I was broken, because someone had seen me clearly, years ago, and had made a plan to make sure I would be okay, and had kept that plan even as her memory was disappearing, and I had not known until now. My mother put her hand on my back and didn't say anything. That was exactly right. The attorney confirmed the will was valid and properly filed with the county. She confirmed that the estate, including the house on Sycamore Drive, was to be held for my benefit, as named beneficiary, independent of my marital status, with specific language protecting it from any claim by a spouse in the event of divorce. Margaret had thought of everything. The safe deposit box contained additional documents, a letter in Margaret's handwriting addressed specifically to me, and a small velvet pouch with 2 additional pieces of her mother's jewelry. One of them was a bracelet that matched the locket she had given me at the rehearsal dinner. The letter said, "Claire, I chose you on purpose, not for Daniel, for this family. If you're reading this without me, then I hope you know you were always the right person. Don't be small for people who never deserved your size. The house is yours. The rest is yours. Hold on to the locket. It opens." I had worn the locket for 4 years. I had never tried to open it. Lockets open, that much I knew, but this one had no visible clasp, no seam I had noticed, and I had simply accepted it as a decorative piece and never thought further. I sat in the attorney's office and I turned the locket over in my hands. There was a small indentation on the side, barely perceptible. I pressed it. It opened. Inside, on one side, was a tiny photograph of a woman I didn't recognize but who looked, around the eyes, like Margaret. On the other side was a handwritten note, folded so small it was nearly a square of paper. I unfolded it carefully. It said, "You are already home." I don't have words for what that did to me. I'm not going to try to explain it. What I will tell you is what happened next. I went home to the house Daniel and I shared. I sat down at the kitchen table. He came in from the living room and looked at me with the particular expression he used when he was bracing for a conversation he didn't want to have. I told him I had been to the house on Sycamore Drive. I told him I had found the box. I told him the attorney had confirmed the will. I was calm. I did not raise my voice. I had spent 7 years being the quietest person in every room, and now I was choosing to be quiet for a completely different reason. He said, "My mother didn't know what she was doing when she wrote that." I said, "The notary and the court disagree." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I had heard before, in different words, at different times, from Renee's texts, from his own silences. "You were never really one of us, Claire." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Your mother disagreed." I stood up. I picked up the bag I had already packed that morning. I picked up the locket which I had set on the table between us. I put the locket on. I walked to the door. I turned around once. I said, "I hope you and Renee figure out whatever it is the two of you are actually doing. I genuinely mean that. I'm done being small so this family doesn't feel crowded." I closed the door behind me. My mother was parked at the end of the driveway. I had asked her to stay. She handed me a coffee when I got in the passenger seat. We drove toward Asheville. The windows were down. It was a warm evening in early June, and the mountains were starting to show on the horizon, and I held the locket in my fingers the whole drive, and I didn't feel the way I thought I would feel. I felt, for the first time in a long time, like exactly the right amount of person. The divorce was finalized 9 months later. The house on Sycamore Drive is mine. I have spent the last several weekends clearing out the wild garden with my mother and a neighbor who offered to help with the rose beds along the south fence. The porch wraps around the left side, and in the evening the light comes in at an angle that makes the whole front of the house look warm. I still teach 3rd grade. I still make my own birthday cards. I still drive the same Honda, though I have been thinking about that. I wear the locket every day. And when my students ask about it, because 8-year-olds notice things and ask about them directly, which is one of the reasons I love them, I open it and I show them the tiny photograph and the tiny folded note, and I tell them that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who plan the farthest ahead. And they always want to know what the note says. I always tell them the truth. You are already home. If you have ever been told by a word, by a silence, by a table that turned to look at you, that you don't belong somewhere you gave years of your life to, I want you to hear this. Someone who saw you clearly may have already made a plan for you. The question is whether you'll be brave enough to go find the box. I was. And I am so glad. If this story stayed with you, please leave a comment. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to Quiet Drama Stories. New stories every week. I'll see you in the next one.